Card games are straightforward, right? You have a set of rules, you have a bunch of numbers, and then you have a text box with an effect that says what the card does when you play it. And Yu-Gi-Oh is no different, albeit complicated ruling nonsense. That seems simple, but it's also not the full picture. See, card games, including Yu-Gi-Oh, have far more going on than meets the eye. The way cards and players interact with each other means that what's written on the card sometimes doesn't really express the true effect of it. And the effect far surpasses what the text, the card says. There are many such cases in Yu-Gi-Oh, and understanding them can give you a huge edge in understanding matchups, understanding metas, your own deck, and will give you a huge edge in tournaments. It's a big thing that I feel like many players don't truly appreciate when they're trying to improve with the game. And at this most recent YCS in Pittsburgh, I made note of a specific interaction that hadn't really clicked for me before that ended up helping me out in my later rounds, and I felt was a good example of this principle in effect. So I felt like it'd be good to share it with you guys, so for one, you can see this one interaction to improve your own play in the current format, and hopefully see my kind of workings of a pro duelist and how I dissect situations that you could apply this to your own deck, other matchups, formats for the future, the past, wherever, and improve your gameplay across all of it. So with this in mind, after you've heard out my interaction here, if there's anything similar that you've discovered through playing the game in certain matchups or decks that follow this sort of principle, because there are many and I sure as hell don't know all of them, so it'd be cool to see what you guys have discovered playing your own deck. As well as if you enjoy this type of content where I try to elevate the player base and give you guys some more insight into the workings of a pro duelist, please consider liking and subscribing. It does go a long way. And I do have other content like this on the channel and on the TCG player channel, where I did a bit of a mini series with some fundamentals and more advanced stuff to get into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, which I'll link in the comment section below. With that said, I want to talk about YCS Pittsburgh. So I played Dracotail. You know, it's been around for a few months now. I've played it for a couple of months. Most people are familiar with this deck. If you're not, this will sound like gibberish to you. I'm not going to explain all the cards here. I'm sorry, but you can go see my last deck profile on the highlights channel, or on this channel, I've done profiles too. So yeah, moving on. In Dracotail, you're often going to have a chance to set a number of Dracotail traps from your deck, but you cannot always set all three. You have Dracotail Flame, Horn, and Sting. So when you're choosing to develop your disruptions, you have the choice for the Spell Negate, the Graveyard Disruption with Sting, and the Attack Position Monster Bounce with Horn. Now, Horn is oftentimes regarded as one of the weakest ones, as it's the easiest to play around. You can bounce any attack position monster, and then, yeah, it's removal, which is fine, but because it stipulates attack position only, opponents can very easily summon all of their best monsters in defense mode. So what this means is Vanquish Soul can summon their guys in defense, and you can't use the Horn. Or if you're playing against the Canine card, same thing. They'll leave level 5s in defense mode until Lupus overlays for XYZ, which now can't be targeted. In the mirror match, something like Secretariat Dragon, the only card that removal really matters for due to its ability, you just put it in defense and no longer a problem. The only real weak spot in that strategy is if it's a Link monster. This Link monster has to be in attack mode, in which Horn can be impactful. Yet in the format we find ourselves in, Link monsters really aren't that common, and the one Link that you could hit, being Snatchy, can quick synchro and kind of just makes Horn still negligible. And when you set this against the alternatives of the Spell Negate, which is really strong right now, hitting cards like Dracotail Raho and Kitu, hitting Branded Fusion, hitting Mitsurugi Ritual, Mitsurugi Prayers, Preparation of Rites, Yummy Surprise. So yeah, when you're kind of putting those two against each other, it seems like Flame is clearly better. And even when you go against Sting, hitting the graveyards, oftentimes it may seem like Sting is better, as almost every deck does use the graveyard to some degree. Even Dracotail, which is not entirely graveyard centric, as the effects will trigger immediately, it still denies value off of cards like Urgula, off of value from Secretariat Dragon, off of value from Frixel, off of value of Arthalion add back. It means that Sting definitely can give you good and guaranteed value, where a Horn in many cases may not have that same promise. So when you're kind of presented an opportunity to set one Dracotail trap, I think it is pretty safe to go for Flame. Flame feels like far and away the best one right now. But when you're presented with an option for the second Dracotail trap, that's where things get interesting, because Sting is way more flexible than Horn. It can be used on way more things. It's almost always going to be live, and you can almost always get some good value from it besides the draw aspect. No doubt more flexible than Horn. And then you have Horn as your other option, which is easy to play around. And this kind of question happens very often in tournaments, especially if you're playing through hand traps. And I find myself wondering, what do I search? Do I search Sting or do I search Horn? Obviously, there's not one easy answer. While I think Flame is a priority, the other two, you will need to judge a little bit on a case-by-case basis which one is preferred. But originally, I may have thought that I'd lean towards Sting more, because that flexibility and guaranteed value means that it is probably the safest one in most scenarios, but it actually works against our goal. You see, whenever you're building a board and playing a deck and playing for follow-up, you need to kind of understand what you're working towards here. Dracotail can be really strong on the follow-up, because you're always going to guarantee that you have the Rahu and Kitu as follow-up, and then other Dracotails as well, and the revive effects of both Gulamel and Arthalion. And in contrast, you have a bit of a weaker end board. It's not weak, I don't want to call it weak, but comparing it to maybe, say, Yamimitsu, it's not as strong. Knowing these things is important, because it means that you know what you have to look for as you're playing out your duel. Because if I'm playing a deck with, say, bad follow-up, and my opponent's making their plays, and I'm deciding where I want to interact, I'm going to try and suffocate them. If my opponent's able to get into a grind game, and I've established my grind game isn't good, then I've probably lost. If alternatively my deck is good in the grind game, like Dracotail, then I'm more encouraged to just focus on staying alive and not letting my opponent set up any super important disruptions, like in the Yummy matchup, Herald of the Arclight. If I'm able to do that, then I'm content in going into a grind game and winning from that position. Knowing how that matchup plays in that regard is the first important step to achieving the second part of this awakening. From there, I decide, okay, I'm playing versus most decks for now. I just need to make sure I stay alive, I engage in a grind game, I'll be good as the Dracotail player. Once I reach this decision, now which one becomes better, Sting or Horn? As the tournament kind of played out for me, I realized every time my opponent got all 3 trap cards set, or I got all 3 trap cards set, the card that was winning me the game when the Dracotail player went second, or losing the game if I was a Dracotail player going second in the mirror, was that Horn. And the reason is not because it was bouncing a guy that was supposed to attack, but if I'm trying to play around the Dracotail Horn, I'm summoning all my initial monsters in defense position, which means until I resolve Urgula, at least one fusion monster with at least 3,000 attack monster is not going to be posing a threat to my opponent's life points this turn, which means they can just strictly ignore it. And if they're going for the perspective of trying to stay alive, then that Horn has already still done its job of denying the attacker, even though it hasn't bounced anything. And then obviously, while the Horn stays on the field, the longer it stays there, if you're trying to continue denying it value, denying its ability to bounce and draw, then you're giving it more value, and that your monsters have to keep going in defense mode, which will push further into a grind game. In many cases, that's really rough, because the first turn player will often have a Secretarion Dragon setup that gives them a big edge in card advantage. It's interesting because this Dracotail Horn has this implicit ability that as long as it's there and your opponent either knows it's there or expects it's there, they're going to be summoning monsters in defense mode. At least they should be. It essentially acts as a level limit area B as long as it's face down. When your end goal for your deck is to stay alive, a level limit area B, an attack floodgate, actually does the job pretty well. Cycling back to what trap do I set? If I have the choice of 2 traps out of the 3, and my goal is to survive, I think I'm pretty confidently going to pick the Horn from now on. This is a lot of different aspects of complex Yu-Gi-Oh coming together, where I'm building backwards from my strategy, understanding my strengths, working towards goals in matchups, but then also understanding how cards have this extra effect onto the game state that isn't written on it. Horn does not say monsters must stay in defense mode, but that's what it does. Interestingly, knowing that this kind of exists, if I decide going second as a Dracotail player, I know Horn is there, and I decide that, say, I can't win a grind game, I'll just summon monsters in attack mode and give them the value. Because me summoning the monster in defense mode is that same thing as me just not summoning it or letting it bounce in general. And if I start summoning multiple monsters in defense mode, that's a problem, because now multiple bodies have been removed for the price of the 1 Horn. This obviously extends to many other fashions as well. Think back to old Yu-Gi-Oh! How Gores was such a big payoff that it meant your opponent didn't attack if that card merely existed. The fact that cards exist and are powerful, and the fact that you can also play around them, also leaves the opportunity for things to spiral in a way where playing around them is an edge within itself and provides this other effect into the game. And that's why I refer to Yu-Gi-Oh metagame and such often as this economy ecosystem, and just a living and breathing thing almost, because there's so many things at play that it can be hard to understand and grasp it all at once. Even the best players like myself can maybe see things from a wider perspective than others, but the full picture is still way more than any one person can truly understand. I'm curious what other interactions you guys have noted that are very similar. Now, one other thing I want to discuss that also happened in YCS Pittsburgh, it's a little different. It's not the same as the effect being different than what's just written on the text. It's more so touching on information, because that's one of the other biggest elements in Yu-Gi-Oh! How you control the flow of information to your opponent. It's important that when you're making plays, you have a reason behind all of it. And everything you do does have a direct impact on the opponents, right? The Dracotail horn does far more than just bounce a monster. It also puts a pressure to turn things to defense mode. What I noticed was I've been doing something to build a habit. When I've been summoning Arthur-Lion, in most cases with Dracotail, I've been summoning it in the extra monster zone. Why do I do that? I don't play Erratic Seal for one, so it's not really a risk of denying that option for me to do that. But what it does do is it means that if my opponent has IP Masquerena on the field, they can link summon for Gorgon and negate it depending on where I summon the Lion. But if I summon it in the extra monster zone, they can't do that. Summoning Arthur-Lion into the main monster zone against Gorgon or into an IP is like one of the worst things you can do. It's a huge blunder. And by making the Lion in the EMZ and forcing myself to learn that habit, I'm avoiding that. Now, obviously, if my opponent does not have an IP Masquerena on the field, this play is pointless. But from my perspective at first, I was like, I'll train myself on this habit. That way I don't make a blunder during the tournament. There's not really a downside for me to do it. I just make cross sheep anyways instead of seals. And yeah, you can see the combos I do in my deck profile. Keep in mind what I said earlier. I said I don't play Erratic Seal. My opponent doesn't know that. So by me summoning Arthur-Lion into the extra monster zone, on my turn 1, when they have no way of it ever being impactful, I'm now conveying information to my opponent. I may not play Erratic Seal, as well as it's clear, at least in this specific position, I have zero intent of making it, which gives away information. For one, if you're playing a Yummy deck or Mitsurugi deck, you might be scared of a Kawakimirror Draco. It's decently popular in enough Dracotail decks that you warrant playing around it. So some interactions like Ash might be held in your hand for Erratic Seal to deny that Draco from happening. That's, again, kind of backward solving logic of you see the problem being the Draco and you play to beat the problem. You identify your deck's weaknesses. And that's good on the Yummy and the Mitsu player. But I'm giving my opponents free information there and free ability to change up their plays in a more beneficial way by summoning that Lion up top. Because yeah, again, it just gives away information. And it goes back to where each of your decisions has these ramifications and they need to be made with purpose. So while it is good that I've been training myself in this habit of summoning Lion up top, I need to know and need to be sure I'm doing it only in the particular spots where it actually matters. Because me training myself has actually had this weird adverse effect of giving away information from opponents that very well might be impacting the game. Even if only a little bit, it can. It's incredible how this level of mind game and playing around things does exist within Yu-Gi-Oh! Because people say it's just a solitaire game. It is not. The micro interactions and decisions within the game are still entirely there. It's what makes the distinction between the best players and the players who just learned their deck and their combos. And as I continue to try and improve myself, and sometimes I have to relearn some of these concepts, it's important that I pay attention to this stuff and always just try and get better. It's important to look out for the stuff as you're playing, because even though I wasn't disappointed with my performance or my play at YCS Pittsburgh, barring one blunder, which I've talked about in the past, it's still interesting that I'm noticing new things. And these are concepts that I know and have learned in the past, but sometimes they can get lost in memory or kind of forgotten about and fade away a little bit. So re-noticing them is important. And it opened my eyes up to see that maybe I'm making mistakes that I haven't seen. Because after all, right, it's very possible that you're making mistakes, you just don't see it. If you knew you're making a mistake, oftentimes you just wouldn't have made the mistake. And a big part of getting better is trying to have this openness to these new concepts and to see what you have to improve. And that's a big thing that, again, I do as I approach every new tournament. And I'm doing it even during the tournament too, right? Because both of these things were things I immediately changed in my play after I noticed them during the YCS. I think I noticed the Dracotail horn thing around round 7 or 8 at the YCS, and it was round 12 when my opponent actually pointed out to me the mistake with Arthur-Lion, as they said, oh, so you don't play seals. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I did kind of give that away. I encourage you guys to really take these concepts to the next step. Let me know how you have applied these in your own games, if you notice anything else yourself. And of course, be respectful in the comments to each other, because you guys love to fight. And maybe I'll share some more stories with you guys, more interactions myself, and replies to your own. With that said, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time. Have a good one.